All right, recording has begun. I am your host, Greg Gaub. We are having our worldwide slot car chat. What are we, number 31? Jeez, I don't even know. Every other week I forget. Thank you, Kelly. Thanks, everybody. 31, yeah, okay, 31, Jesus. I'm your host, Greg Gaub. If you're just tuning in for the first time, whatever. Watch some previous episodes to see introductions, to see our regulars' slot history, see where we're coming from. I don't see any new people on, no new cameras. Looks like we got Kelly, and we got RK and Leo and John and Luff and Lloyd, and looks like we've got Ray is with us, Mr. Carthy, and I'm sure we'll get Chris Walker and other people on momentarily. So how's everybody doing? No, seriously.
I was going to ask you, Greg, you use the Scorpius controller?
I have one. I would not say that I use it.
Did you find that it eats the batteries?
Yes, it does. I haven't used it long enough to determine how long a pair of batteries will last if I'm using it as my main controller, right?
You have to take them out.
You have to take them out because it'll just kill the batteries over time. So if you play with it and then put it on the shelf and then you take it off the shelf 2 or 3 months later, it won't work. You got to change the batteries.
Here's what I did.
Oh, nice. The battery pack. Did you put a switch on it?
No, but it's I glued it to the outside.
There you go. So you can just
it's a lot easier.
Real quick.
Yeah, I like the controller.
It's
especially with the virus thing. We want to keep people separated.
Yeah, you can make sure everybody's far apart. It's a nice controller, and it's got some great features. It's a good feeling controller. It's got like the slotted controller. It's a nice light trigger. I like a light trigger. I don't like a stiff trigger.
Mm-hmm.
But because it's a Professor motor handle, it's essentially a Professor motor handle. It's got those 2 little points in the back, right above the grip. So depending on how you hold the controller, it could be poking your hand. So if you've held a Professor motor controller, you know what a Scorpius controller feels like because it's the same shell.
Yeah, I take a little grinder and I round all those bits off.
Yeah, that and it's Professor motor trigger as well. As far as I recall, I don't have a Professor motor controller, but the ones that I played with in the past, I remember the trigger was the same. And I know some guys will shape the trigger as well to give it more of a rounded shape because it's pretty squarish. Yeah. But yeah, it's a good controller. I've used it for, I don't have the wireless module that you probably have for yours, but I have it I use it for digital slot racing, which is what it's designed for. So
I like being able to walk around when I'm building a truck. I can walk around and drive from different spots.
Yep.
Yeah, it's good.
Yep, and that's what I use my slotted controller for, wireless. Basically, I have the slotted doing the same thing that you're doing with the Scorpius controller.
I didn't know slotted had a cordless.
Yeah, you basically get the oxygen digital cartridge for the controller, so it's like an oxygen digital controller, and then they have a wireless receiver that you then plug your analog cartridge in. So if you've got a slotted controller with an analog cartridge, then you're halfway there. The only thing you need to get is the oxygen cartridge that you then put into the handle, and then what's called the CRI, or Common Radio Interface, or Cartridge Radio Interface. I forget which one it's called, but it's a CRI. You then plug your analog cartridge into the CRI, and then you hook that to your track. And so then the controller talks to the CRI, controlling the track. So it's basically exactly like what you have with the Scorpius controller and the WAM, but more modular.
Okay.
What were you going to ask, John?
Well, I was just going to ask if what anyone would recommend for wireless control for an analog layout.
Either one of those products.
No?
Carrera offers analog
I was questioning that. I mean, because their controllers are okay.
Yeah, I'm not a big plunger fan.
Yeah, I prefer a trigger as well.
There's also the Scalextric Arc Air, or the Arc Pro has an air mode, and Arc Air or Pro in analog mode is 2-lane analog. with wireless controllers, and they're trigger controllers. They feel good ergonomically.
Right.
So if you wanted to retrofit your track to have wireless controllers,
Right.
I'd say just get the Arc Air base, and it comes with, you know, a power supply and 2 controllers, and then you either try to figure out how to use adapters to get it into your track, or you could just, you know, yank the track off and wire it to your existing track. The tricky part would be if the lane spacing on your existing track is not the same as Scalextric Sport lane spacing.
Yeah, it wouldn't because it's Carrera.
Probably wouldn't be, yeah. So then you'd have to figure out either I don't care about the lap timing that comes with the Arc Air because I'm just using it for wirelessness.
Right.
Or if I want to use that Bluetooth, you know, to your tablet or phone lap timing and race management stuff, then figuring out how to MacGyver those sensors into your existing track.
Okay.
Or use adapters from your existing system to the sport power base track. But
So
it's super affordable.
Okay, so because if you're using like I use an external power base, like a pyramid, is there an interface you can use that would work?
Well, what you could literally do if you wanted to is instead of the wires coming from your pyramid to your controller hookups, you could, or rather from your current controller hookups to the track. I assume you've got plugins or jacks or something like that for your controllers. So what I would do in that case is wire a switch in between your existing controller hookups that then have the 2 leads that go to the rails, right? I'd wire a switch between that and the rails, and then one side of the switch is coming from your existing controller hookups, and the other side of the switch is coming from the rails of the power base.
Okay.
So you could just kind of do it that way. That would be a pretty economical way to do pretty good wireless, because in fact the Arc Air /Pro Scalextric wireless controllers are oxygen controllers. They are slotted wireless oxygen capable controllers. In fact, you can download firmware and wirelessly load oxygen compatible firmware onto those controllers. So they're also a very economical way to add to your numbers of controllers, or for people to get into oxygen racing with a starter level controller by picking up an Arc Air controller. It's $30 just for the controller. You could buy them by themselves, put on the oxygen wireless firmware into that controller using your phone, and then you have an oxygen controller for, you know, so you could literally be an oxygen racer, a digital racer in an oxygen club by only buying one oxygen chip. The Type C is the most common and most versatile chip, and one Scalextric Arc Air /Pro controller. Put the appropriate firmware in, put the car on the track, and you're an oxygen racer.
Wow.
But yeah, they're good controllers. The Scorpius system is pretty. It's more expensive than that. In fact, one Scorpius controller, especially if you also include the wireless module that Luff uses, is more expensive than an Arc Air power base that comes with 2 controllers and a power supply. So you're spending about the same, or maybe even less, to get the whole Arc Air thing going than you would for just 1 lane worth of what Luff is using. But you also don't have all those fancy dials, and you can't adjust your throttle curve and have, you know, adjustable brakes and all that kind of stuff either.
Well, I'm glad this is being recorded, because I may put it on a loop for some people here due to the seasonality of our discussion.
I mean, it's all out there somewhere on various forums and boards and stuff like that. And what you got, Leo?
In my experience, I got an Arc Air setup to use with my Ninco track. And so I rewired it. I was using the standard Hornby Scalextric power unit, feeding into the Arc Air power base. And then I had 2 wires coming from the rails going up to the Ninco track. I had plug-in connectors, so I didn't bother with a switch. I just wanted to get it working. So I had two-way connector plug-in, and after about 3 uses of that, somehow or other I managed to blow it up. So I'm not sure what happened, the MOSFET for one track was burned out. I could see that on the circuit board, but the thing just wouldn't work. You know, I powered it up, it's powered up, and then after about half a second or a second, just shut down completely again. So I tried desoldering the MOSFET and things like that, but couldn't get it back together again. So I'm afraid it's in a corner, forgotten about now. But yeah, the concept is good, and with a lot of care, you'd probably be okay, John. But it is a bit fragile, should we say?
I mean, yeah, you want to take every precaution to make sure that nothing is going to cause the power base to short out. You know, it's designed to be the power supply. It's designed to be in the track, right? It's not designed to have its power tapped off into something else. So I don't know, maybe a connector, you know, kind of found a way to short itself out. And the annoying thing about electronics, which I am not in any way educated on whatsoever, is the mystery of electronics, right? That one MOSFET, you'd think, well, that controls that one lane that's not working, but then the whole power base doesn't work because the power base electronics are designed to go through that one MOSFET, and it you know,
yeah,
yes. One little teeny thing way over on that side could make the whole thing just not work. And it's like, well, fuck it, what, you know.
Yeah,
that's why analog racers tend to shy away from digital altogether, because, you know, a chip has a component that blows and you're like, well, screw it, that chip is garbage.
Yeah, once the smoke escapes, it's gone.
Yeah, don't let the magic smoke out. Exactly. Yeah.
So it's good to have a fire extinguisher handy just in case. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I always do.
You know, and on the bright side, there are skillful people out there who can repair just about any digital chip. I'm sure a lot of us are well aware of Greg K on the slot forum. You know, he takes chips from all over the world, from all different brands of you know, digital slot card manufacturers. You know, Scalextric and Slotted Oxygen and Carrera and everything. Mostly Scalextric. He's done thousands of chip repairs, and he can fix burnt off tracings from the board. Right? He can find the component that got so damaged that it actually burnt the tracings out of the board, and rewire those tracings so that the chip is functional again. Rarely is a chip so damaged that he cannot repair it. And when he finds a chip that is so damaged that it cannot be repaired, that he cannot repair it, it's news. It's like, wow, this one was so damaged I couldn't fix it because look at all this. I mean, it's like Armageddon on a chip that you would just see everything is burnt off and there's no tracings left and stuff like that. But you know, if you just pop a cap or a MOSFET or something like that, he can replace those you know, with a blindfold on. You know.
Yeah, I reported it on Slot Forum, and I waited for Greg Key to message me saying, send it to me and I'll have a look, but he hasn't yet.
Ping him, you know, he seemed to not be on for a little while. Maybe he got maybe he took a break for some reason, but he seems to be active again. So, you know, send him a message if he's got your hardware, and I'm sure he'll take a look at it.
Yeah,
I can't imagine
that
he would be able to repair it.
Yeah.
It would have to be pretty bad for him to not be able to repair it. But yeah, I have pretty much every wireless controller available for Scalextric Digital, which includes Scorpius and Slotted and a couple other more obscure things.
Is there any delay in in control at all?
No, that's pretty much the death of a wireless controller. You know, in slot cars, a millisecond is too much. So in fact, early on when I was testing some of the hardware before they went into production, when I would complain about lag, it was all, I mean, once I got past the tendency for some people to say, you must be doing something wrong, they figured out how to fix it, you know, because if there's any lag at all on a slot car controller, It's unacceptable. Any at all is unacceptable. So yeah, anytime there was any, the first thing I would be doing is like, okay, why is it there, and can we get rid of it? Can you fix it? Is it my problem? Is it your problem? But generally speaking, if it was, if the hardware went into production and is being sold on the open market, then there is no lag.
Okay, because lag can even happen with a wired controller, like an analog controller, if it's dirty, right? So
Yeah, and so that's what you're comparing it to, is a nice, clean, fully functional analog wired controller. And if you can feel a lag, then you're not going to use that controller. Nobody's going to buy that controller. And there were times when like there's a couple of wireless controllers that require the computer to be the interface between the controller and the power base. And so if the computer wasn't up to snuff, then it would be introducing the lag. And sometimes it's not even that the computer is up to snuff or isn't up to snuff, but that there is some setting that needs to be optimized in the computer, like the latency of the serial port, that kind of stuff. And so at one point I was playing with one of the wireless controllers, and I'd be saying, yeah, there's a lag here. Can't you guys feel it? And they're like, no, I don't feel anything. I'm like, okay, well, good for you. And then I found where, I found out how to get rid of the lag, by, running the app as administrator and changing the latency of things, and, changing the priorities of, processing priorities and stuff like that to give it as much oomph as it could possibly get. And the lag was almost imperceptible. And that is something that you can get used to that with your finger. If it's just barely there, then after you've done a few laps, it's no big deal. But early on, it was like, that's a lag. I'm not going to race with the car like that. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And I feel like I sound like I feel like I'm better than other people when I say stuff like this, but there's a whole lot of people out there who've been racing for longer than I would think that they've been racing when they say that they can't feel a power drop on a track. But there's a power drop on that track. I'm racing around the track and there's a power drop right there. Can't you feel it? Nope, I don't feel it. It's like, bruh, you're driving the same kind of car I'm driving. My controller ain't that fancy. There's a power drop right there on your track. And I'm like, how do you not feel this? But, then I've come to understand that there are people out there that have been racing for years and still can't feel the loss of power on whatever.
Well, where were they in the beverage cycle? Do you know?
Some of these are teetotalers, dude. It definitely wasn't that. It was just, I can't explain it other than, they're just not cognizant of the fact that their car isn't as zippy there as it is over there where the power tap is. There's no power tap there. Your connections are loose. You've got a power drop there. There's a power tap here. The car shoots off like a rocket from there, but not from there. How can you not feel that? And it's like, okay, well, some people just can't feel that. So the same kind of thing, I assume that the same situation is with lag on a wireless controller. Some people just don't feel the lag, and probably the same kind of people that prefer magnet racing. Oh, there we go. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just taking the Mickey.
One thing I can't remember about arc air is whether the dynamic braking worked or not. I've got a feeling it didn't. Like, I wouldn't swear to it. So that is one difference that I kind of think might be there.
I'll have to break mine out to do some testing, but I think it's supposed to. The Arc 1 doesn't have a dynamic braking, but that was wired. It was
maybe that's something else. Yeah.
Yeah, the Arc 1 was basically just a really crappy controller hookup the only reason you buy an Arc 1 is for the lap timing stuff that it does with your phone. Don't even try to use, no hobbyist should be using the controllers that come with an Arc 1. Just use something else for the controllers on an Arc 1. But the Arc Air uses pretty much the same technology as the Arc Pro does as far as car control. It's basically digital, right? It's chipping the lanes, you know, so it's the wireless controllers are telling the power base how much power to put to the track. But that's a good point. I can't say that I'm 100% sure that the Arc Air has dynamic braking or not.
I think you're right. I'm thinking of the Arc 1. But I don't really remember any real problems when the Arc Air was working okay. It was fine. It was no delay, and the braking seemed okay, I think. I can't really remember, to be honest.
I mean, it's either on or off. You know, I think the settings, you don't have quite as many settings with Arc Air as you do with Pro, because for whatever reason, they just decided that you don't need that in the analog version of it. But I'm pretty sure you could either have brakes on or off. And it's either going to coast or stop on a dime. If it's got magnets, it's going to stop on a dime anyways.
Anyway.
Wow.
You might have hit on the reason that some people don't feel the lag when you said any hobbyist. Maybe some of those guys are not hobbyists, right? They just like to play.
Yeah.
Some guys are racers, some guys are just drivers.
Yeah, even in a magnetless analog club running slotted and NSR and stuff like that, they're just and they're good drivers too. They're not bad drivers. But
there's a club like that down here where there are racers and there are drivers and there are drinkers. Right? And I mean that's the way it goes.
Yeah, in real racing we call them revenue.
Fresh meat is what I would have called it. Okay.
Hey, not back of the pack anymore. Bring on the newbies. I need somebody to be better than. So, as I asked earlier, how's everybody doing? Doing good?
Cool. Locked up again.
Lots of thumbs up. I like to see that.
Are we all locked down again?
Oh, are you?
Yeah, quite a few of us are locked down again.
Yeah, our
maybe not as bad as the first time round, but there's quite a lot of it going on down here.
Not quite so bad, but
I'm locked down by choice. I think it's
a
sensible way to go.
Smart man.
I don't know if you can see, Greg, but I got a table set up finally.
Yay!
Way to go, Kelly. That's the first step, man.
I'm graduating. So hopefully by the end of this week, it'll be a track on it.
Do you have a plan? Did you draw a layout at all yet?
Yeah, Greg gave me a list of a whole slew of layouts. I'm gonna deal with the one. I don't want necessarily call it simple, but a layout where I have enough track to lay it out at. I can't remember what it is. Greg, you said it's one of your favorite ones on the 4x16.
The Bertrand figure 8.
Yeah. Well, I'll do that one for just to have something up, and then figure out what I really want afterwards. But I just wanted to let you know I do have a table. So.
I mean, you're well aware of the beauty of sectional track from your SCX track. And I will never knock a guy who likes sectional track. My track, obviously, as you can see, is sectional track. Although I haven't changed that layout in going on 5 or 6 years or more. It's been a while. That's only because, well, until this year, I've been able to race on a dozen other tracks in the area, so I don't feel the need to change my track. But at first it was a new layout every day, multiple layouts in the same day. Even when I got the table, and started putting track up on a table, it changed many times.
Well, just having track on a table is a huge elevation from doing it on the floor.
Ooh, look, Brian's showing up.
At least 29 inches, right?
Exactly. That's what. Yeah, you got it.
I see electric sport
Greg, you said you haven't changed your track in 5 years.
plus.
This one's changed twice since yesterday. I just finished, I was putting up some of the guardrails. I actually lost one off the end of the table here. That's why I was a few minutes late starting, but yeah, I normally don't go with elevations, and I just thought I'd try a little bit, just to maybe equalize the lanes a little bit, give my son a chance. So this is what we did, or I did. Actually, when he left last night, it didn't look like this at all. It was totally different. It was kind of just a tweak to what we had. This is totally different. There's
Brian, that looks spectacular. Have you ventured to try off camber turns yet?
I'm going to pretend you didn't say that.
I like those bridge supports. Where did those come from?
Actually, I cut them. They're just 3/4 inch plywood. I cut them 8 inches wide, and I cut them in 1/2 inch increments, starting at a 1/2 inch.
Okay.
So there's 1/2, 1, 1.5, 2,
Cool.
2.5,
Nice.
and then 2.5 all the way around. Well, like I said, I have a wood shop here, so I mean, it's like,
Uh-huh.
I
Easy.
got wood everywhere. So
I thought that they actually had a little piece along the side to locate them across the track, like the track was sitting in them, but now I see it's just a plain flat piece. Okay.
not yet. Actually, I'm kind of toying with the idea of maybe using maybe some 1/8 inch Luan or something on it, because again, being flexible, I don't know if you can see, in some cases you get a little bit of sag.
Yeah.
Some of the tracks got a little torque to it. You know, this track's a decade old, most of it. My son actually suggested carbon rods. They're arrow tracks is what they are. And I can probably get them for about 50 cents a piece, but I'm thinking those might make really nice axle tubes.
What do you use the carbon rods for?
Arrows.
Arrows, yeah.
Arrows. Oh wow, that's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, that's not a new idea. And I guess while we're showing off, made a trip to the local hobby shop this weekend. You guys should recognize those if you've been on the website lately.
Yep.
Oh, very
Those
nice.
things.
Those are-
And I couldn't help myself. I got a better deal buying 4.
Wow.
Those little buggers are rockets.
So are those the sideways or Carrera?
Nope, these are all Carreras.
Carrera.
I said, local hobby shop, if I buy 3, I think if I buy 4, they're $28 a piece.
Wow.
So if you buy 1 to 2, they're 36. If you buy 3, they're 32. If you buy 4 or more, they're 28. So yeah, it's been all Carrera lately. I had to kind of clear the mess a little bit here, just so I wasn't knocking things around the table while I was moving track around. They haven't even put the boxes away yet. So,
I love the vintage race car park you have there. That's awesome.
yeah, well, that just went up a few minutes ago. Normally, or about a couple hours ago. Normally, the cars are on the track or on the tables, but it's getting to the point where that's getting harder and harder to do. But I kind of was hoping I might use this area out in here for that, for at least some of them. I need to build something else to get them off the table. 5 years, Greg. You don't know what you're missing.
No, I'm good. Mine's pretty much stuck down with wiring and wiretaps and stuff like that. It's not easy to change. So
Yeah, I hear you. I don't know if you noticed. Let me turn that back on again. I have you can see the gaps in my tables.
mhm.
Those are intentional because, as you can see, wiretaps.
Yep.
And it allows me to move them around the table. There's another one there. There's actually 5 taps on this track.
So
So
how long is it, Brian? At least in this configuration, do you know?
I would, they're 16-foot tables, so I'm guessing it's probably 60, 65 feet maybe.
Wow.
Figure
Yeah.
once there and back's probably 30 feet. So this
And-
is all I have. It's a few turns and a couple straights. So
Have you tried it in both directions as well, or just one?
actually, the one we put up yesterday, I tried in the other direction and I actually liked it better. My son told me I was messing with the mojo of the track. So I tore the track down and started over. Seemed the logical thing to do. I think I could expand this a little bit more. I could probably take this center section here and go that way, another straight or half. But I'm one of those guys, I don't like my track crammed in. This to me is almost unacceptable. That's closer than I like, but in this case, kind of have to do it because this is a power tap that actually goes through the table. It was the first one I put in. And that one I can't really move much. So, but it's a fast track. The one we did last night ended up being really slow, and I still want my fast cars to be my fastest cars. So, all right, enough.
Need to get some borders on those tracks.
I got them everywhere except the inside. That's what I was doing when I signed on initially.
Not fences,
Yeah.
borders.
We don't lose them off the table too often, actually.
I didn't see any borders. So just to be clear, I'm talking about additional track surface for the cars to slide on, not
Right.
fences.
I have some. I actually have quite a few. I don't have enough to do everything. So we're mag racers, so we don't do a whole lot of sliding anyways.
Sure. That makes sense.
We're sinners, so.
As long as you're having fun, I don't care.
Well,
Well,
it looks absolutely great, Brian. Looks
Yeah,
great.
thanks for showing off.
It does. If you don't mind me asking, Brian, where are you located?
I'm in the St. Louis area.
Okay. Okay.
We're getting ready. They're locking us down here. I thought I heard Dennis say something. It was pretty bad over there. Our confirmed cases doubled last week. So
Yeah, we're in.
they've restricted gatherings, including in your home, to 10 people or less.
Yeah, I mean, they're not sending
Yep.
around the Gestapo on us, but they basically said no more than 5 people in your house that aren't in your household, right? So we basically can't have a Thanksgiving meal together because that would exceed the number of non-household people in our house. If we are going to gather that many people, then it should be outdoors, and that's not going to happen in this part of the world. So basically what we're going to do is, because we want yummy food from Thanksgiving, we're basically going to act as though we're going to all meet. So it's going to be a family potluck like normal. Everybody's going to cook their favorite dishes, but they're going to then pre-portion them out into containers, and then we're all going to meet in one place and swap our portioned containers so that everybody basically gets a full Thanksgiving meal with all the yummy things. Then everybody goes back home to reheat and or prepare their dishes, and then we're all going to be on a Thanksgiving family Zoom call while we eat our various food items and play silly games on Zoom.
Yep, sounds pretty much standard for everybody, I think.
Certainly an interesting way of doing it.
I mean, it's better than just sitting at home and having a microwave meal and getting on this. I mean, we're going to be having a Zoom chat no matter what, but this is pretty much my fill of Zoom. Once a week, I'm good. I don't need to be doing Zoom more than that. My poor wife, she's the breadwinner. She's on freaking video conference calls all day long, every freaking day.
So did I just hear you're a kept man there, Greg?
I am. I have a sugar mama. I am a houseboy. I am a kept man. I am whatever else you want to say, because
St. Louis has a different term for
why
that.
should I work if I don't have to?
I hope you do the cooking, Greg.
I do all the cooking. Yep.
Yeah.
I have for many years. She bakes a couple of things, but she doesn't really cook very much. But yeah, that's the deal. I raised the kids and cooked the food, and
Well, now there's something to be thankful for.
I don't do a whole lot of cleaning. And she's not real happy about the lack of cleaning, but at least I cook.
All you gotta do now is get some tips from Kelly on how to smoke. do some
How to
smoke.
smoke some brisket, yeah, something like that. Tempting. I'm not going to call myself a chef. I will cook food, but I am not a chef.
I can cook
Anywho.
water.
What you got left?
I can cook water.
You can boil water.
Cook it.
You can cook it, yeah. I know people who can burn water.
Yeah.
Well, anybody got any slot related topics other than track they want to talk about? Any show and tell?
I
News?
got a little show and tell.
Okay, show and
Anybody
tell.
wants to see it? Yeah.
Yeah, go
So
for it.
I've been messing about recently with some Sidewinder chassis. And actually, Dennis, if you want to take a look, this is kind of like a, here, I got to share this with everybody. Let me just do that first here. Sorry about this, folks. Okay. Oh, raise back in. Sorry about that. Now let me just see how I share here. Share screen. Okay, right here.
Bottom there, that little green thing.
There we go.
Yeah, I
So,
just turned it on. So
so this is intended to go under one of those Tomy Porsche models. And so the front axle here, is that full screen enough for you folks?
Yeah, that's big.
How's that? Is that better? So there's piano wire that is soldered to this pan, but allows for some movement here on the front axle. The pan has it has the motor and the guide blade soldered to it as well as the rear axle, and then these pans are soldered to the side of the piano wire.
rails.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's going to make any Sam Hill bit of difference, but it's light brass in the center, so there is some flexing to it.
What do you define as light brass?
Oh gosh, I wish I knew what thickness it was. Gosh, I don't know what the actual thickness is, but it looks like
032s, which is pretty light. Yeah.
Yeah.
0.8 millimeter.
That's about right. Yeah, exactly. And trying to sort of keep up with you and Chris, I pulled out the old Brasso to see if I could make it look shiny. And it's not bad.
That's not bad at all. When you're soldering, the first thing to do, of course, is to scrub it down while you're busy. Every time you're done with a couple of joints, couple of soldering joints, excuse me.
Right.
And then, because you have acid flux all over the place, you don't want to leave everything in contact with the acid flux for too long. So the idea is then just to scrub it down, put it under some running water. I just scrub it down with a toothbrush or with I have a little stainless steel brush, and then just scrub each joint to get all the muck away.
Oh, okay.
And then if you've got excess solder like that, you could take that away with, there's a couple of different ways. I have those little, it's like a little bristle brush that fits into a Dremel tool.
Oh yeah.
But it's those little white plastic bristles that have the aluminum oxide impregnated in them.
Right.
And I use that, and that takes the solder off really, really nicely. Let me see if I've got one. I'll find one somewhere here so you can see what I'm talking about.
That chassis was kind of an evolution of this one here. So I'll just show you. And this was in the latest sort of little episode I did on my YouTube channel. So instead of having the brass rails on the side here, I thought I'd try piano wire and see if it made any sort of difference. I've run this chassis. It runs really, really well, actually.
Mm-hmm. And there, the side pieces are loose, right?
Yes, yeah. They're just held together with, bring it back here. I beg your pardon. There's just a solder joint here on the side and a solder joint in the middle. So yeah, there's some flexing here, as well as.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but what I've done similar to that before is if you use like 2 pieces of wire across, and you solder the one piece just to the outside 2 and the other one just to the inside, just to the middle, then that outside assembly can actually move a little bit.
Okay.
And that also gives you some nice damping. But if you're just getting the brass to flex like that, the car will probably handle pretty nice, very very smooth and soft, with not a lot of snap to the when it comes out the track.
Yeah, without the body on it, you're absolutely right. It's a lovely thing to drive, and that's only an 030 motor. I mean, that's like a Lloyd. I'm sure you recognize those. It's like a 1/43 scale motor, and it's just a little peppier than maybe an NC1, but it's in that range. So
Yeah.
I'm really hoping that it'll be a really fun little car. And that's sort of here. This is just sizing things up before I actually went and built things. And then there it is in the jig.
And the motor is what, soldered in, or?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's actually soldered right to the center pan.
Okay.
Yeah, so it won't move.
Dennis, can you show that again? What you was holding up?
This is the little Dremel. It's still in its packaging. The little Dremel. Sorry, I guess if I keep talking, it's the little Dremel brushes or bristles that I use to clean up the solder. There are a couple of different hardnesses of it. This one is the white one, which is like the medium one. The coarse one is way too coarse, and the fine one, you just spend too much time. This is like 120 grit. It's a EZ472SA is the number, if ever you want to find them. They're not cheap, but they work very, very well, and they last quite a long time. Yeah, I buy them like 6 or 8 at a time because I use so many. But if you're just building 1 or 2 chassis, one of those brushes will clean 5 or 6 chassis without any problem. Particularly just the few joints that John has on his.
Right.
Can you be more specific about what you mean by cleaning up the solder? Are you talking about just making?
Well, if you have a look at those pictures of John's, right, there is solder that is lying on the top of the brass and on the top of the wire that's not actually in the joint between the brass and the wire.
Right.
And that is known as ballast.
Okay. So it's not performing any function. It's not doing anything for the strength of the joint.
Right.
Right.
I mean, okay. I
Right,
would have thought that additional solder on that additional material would help provide structural integrity to the joint.
Why?
Because I'm stupid.
Okay, I didn't say that.
I mean, you think about, like, okay, I've got rivets holding 2 things together like this, but then I've got an I-beam on the top of it with rivets holding it together as well. That would be stronger than just the rivets.
Yeah, but
that's my thought process.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not saying this is not the way.
But I see what you're saying, Dennis. In other words, really, all the strength is in the joint, not
correct. Yes, in that little fillet of solder that runs along the length of that piano wire that joins it to the piece of brass, right? If you can see solder all the way along the length of that short piece of piano wire,
how's that? Is that better?
The brass, that 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch or whatever, I would run the. I'm pointing at my screen. That doesn't really help, does it? But I would run the solder joint the length of that piece of wire on both sides, and all that extra solder that's lying, particularly on the inside one, that hump, where you've got that piece, that's just ballast. That's not doing anything for the strength of the joint at all.
Right. And that was basically an error on my part. I used too much solder.
Yeah, if you look at the joints on the cross pieces,
they're nice.
Very nice, much better.
Yeah.
And they hardly need any cleanup at all.
Right.
Okay, so you're actually talking about removing the excess solder from
Correct,
everywhere outside of the joint itself.
Correct.
Okay.
That's what I was talking about.
I want to
No,
make
I
sure
don't
that you
wanna-
weren't talking about making it shiny versus
No,
actually.
no.
Taking
I'm
it off.
taking that, removing this. Yeah. If
Yeah,
you want to make it shiny, then you put it in a tumbler.
Right. Or,
Are you
or,
us-
or
Are
I was
you
gonna say,
using acid flux, John?
pardon me, sorry?
Are you using acid flux?
No, that's why it didn't, that's why I got the globs. I used basically, you know, what do you
Rosin
call
core
it?
solder.
Yeah, well, no, actually, plumber's flux.
Oh God.
Hey, you know, we're in a group here. We're all sharing and
I mean, when I think plumber, I'm thinking pipes, not.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, some plumber's flux is acid core. I mean, it was
is,
acid
yeah.
anyway.
yeah,
It's
it's
just
acid,
not,
it's just goopy, so it doesn't flow as well as it should. That's
it's
all.
not as good as a proper acid flux,
That's right. Yeah.
right?
Right. And then again, I made the pieces of solder that I used too big. Whereas, you know, I'll be honest, these pieces were cut by my daughter and then I went, oh, that looks really good. And then you can tell that these were done after this.
Mhm.
So it's, you know, young eyes versus old hands and eyes.
I mean, we can talk for probably a whole 2 hours about soldering techniques.
Yeah.
The solder that I use, I buy from Radio Shack. It's 0.015 of an inch. It's 15 thousandths in diameter.
Wow.
It has 2% silver in it, and it actually, they say it has rosin flux in it, but I don't bother with that because I put a lot of acid flux. I have a little bottle of acid flux, and then I apply the acid flux where I want it along the joint with a small paintbrush, and then I will place the soldering iron up against the joint in basically the tip of the iron going into the flux, and the flux will bubble and it'll boil, and then I will introduce the solder from the wire by hand. I'm not carrying the solder from the coil of solder wire onto the joint on the iron. I'm actually applying it, and then you can control very much better how much goes in there. And usually you start there at one end of that. Those are not that such long joints, so you can put your soldering iron like a chisel tip down right in the middle of that joint and hold it there, and it'll heat up that whole area. And then you can move the solder along the joint a little so that it flows all the way along the length of it.
In fact, from having taught people how to solder to meet military specs, typically, first off, the least amount of solder in the joint creates the strongest joint. Excess solder actually can make the joint weak. Second thing is, typically the way we taught people to solder was you applied flux to what you were going to solder, then you put solder on the iron tip and touched it. And as the flux boiled, it literally drew the solder inside the joint. And then you removed your iron, you got a real nice, smooth, strong joint. Now there's also, for electronics, there's a desoldering material which looks like braid that's actually impregnated with flux that you can lay on the joint, lay the iron on with a little bit of solder on the tip, and it will actually suck out that excessive solder. Yeah, typically the least amount of solder works the best. And depending upon what you're soldering, when you're doing metal, yeah, acid flux is better. Some plumbers' fluxes are an acid flux. And of course, for electronics, you don't want to introduce acid. You definitely want to just use regular rosin core solder. Now, I used to buy this in like 5-pound rolls of the very, very thin 5-core rosin solder for electronics. And this was the good stuff when, you know, back before we got into all the stuff with the lead and all that other stuff. Because today's modern solders are just not as good as the old stuff.
Oh, okay.
I thought I saw Chris. Chris, did you pop your voice in there for a sec?
with regards to?
Okay, I was just making sure I saw you somewhere because I don't see your name in my list here.
No, I am using Leslie Chester's computer
Okay,
today.
here we go. Much better.
So, well, to your point, Chris, I used too much solder. I mean, again, on these side pans, a better job on the two tubes here that I soldered, and of course on the guide flag. But so I guess, is that a question of just solder, or being not very patient, or just all thumbs?
Patience and liquid acid flux are two very important things in solder.
Lots of heat and lots of practice.
Yeah.
Practice, practice, practice.
Practice, practice, practice. 10,000 hours, and then you might be about as good as Chris.
Oh gosh, no. Well, again, Chris, this is a tribute to you. That's why the Brasso was pulled out, because I just thought I'd make it look as good as I could, based on the all thumbs effort here.
I don't think he wants
Okay,
that
no,
tribute.
hey,
Give it a few more months and then tribute.
It's all good. There's nothing like building a chassis out of anything and then seeing it go around the track. That's just like a great thing.
I absolutely agree. This one hasn't gone around, but the other one has. Hang on, let me just reduce this here. This one has. In fact, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a ton of things you can do down the road that will make the chassis work a little bit better and look a little bit nicer. But the main thing at this point is that you're doing it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's what my wife tells me a lot.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, dear, that was almost tasty, but you're doing it.
There you go. There you go.
Sure, that's what you meant. Okay, sure.
Yeah. It's a family show. No, but I appreciate that, Chris. But honestly, you can see here, I guess, that there are some half decent solder joints, and then there's Mr. Blobo there.
Well, those are, when I started making chassis, the difference between the chassis that I make or Dennis makes now and the ones I made 50 years ago, there's a big difference.
Oh yeah, it's like chalk and cheese. I could never get.
So when I'm 100, I'll be real good.
Well, and then comes the difference in building a chassis that goes around the track and then incorporating some dynamics into the chassis to make the car go really well around the track.
Yeah, well, it's the old Carroll Shelby saying, right? You can build anything that'll go down the road, but once you start racing, it's a totally different.
Well, yeah, there's all kinds of little stuff. But if you're playing in your basement and you like watching the cars go around, as we've said before, you can make them out of popsicle sticks or aluminum tubes or anything you want, and they'll all go.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you guys taking a look at it. Thank you.
Looking good.
I think that's a great topic. So if anybody else would like to toss in some, chassis soldering tips of any kind for any kind of chassis, any kind of soldering, if you just want to share your wealth of knowledge, now is a great time to do that.
Well, I mean, tools are important. You're not going to solder a chassis using any kind of a soldering iron that has one of those little pencil tips that are good for electronic boards. Not going to happen. So you basically need a minimum of a 45 watt iron. I use and have used a 45 watt Unger iron for years, and Dennis knows. Dennis probably has a couple in his. There's been more chassis built with that iron than any other iron known to man combined.
Can I just ask you a quick question though? How do you use the iron so that none of the pieces move from being ham-handed with it?
Well, you need a jig.
But even in a jig, sometimes you can kind of do well. Okay, I shouldn't talk about myself, but like that. But
well, you've got.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, that's close. I don't know about that tip, but
no, you can get a 1/4 inch chisel tip for that. that looks sort of like a screwdriver, like a straight bladed end on the thing.
Right.
There you go. This one right here.
The one with the red handle in the middle there?
Yeah, the Weller W1. That is a copy of the old Unger 776 iron.
That is what I use for absolutely everything.
Yep. And you can buy.
That's a 50 watt, and so that one does a little bit of that. Does some pretty heavy duty work.
Yeah,
$40.
John,
Wow.
you can Google up PCH slot parts
Okay.
and PCH slot parts. The whole tip, it's not actually a tip, it's an integrated tip and a heating element that screws into the base.
But it depends on the, yeah.
Yeah, but the 776 is.
Mhm.
So PCH slot parts, they sell Weller
Quite expensive.
45 watt tips. Go down to soldering.
Oh, on the side there, yeah.
There you go.
Here we
45.
go.
So
There's one in there somewhere.
well, what's showing on this screen right now are the red handles, and
Yeah.
those have the screw-in elements, which is a combined element and tip, the first ones. But if you look down just to the left, the second row, Greg, yeah, that one, click on that one. You get the bigger view, and you see that has a thread on the end of it, right? And then there are little tips that fit onto those threads. And that's what Chris is talking about. Correct?
Well, no, because go back to where you were. Yes and no. There's one. Go back, John.
Who's doing the navigating here?
It's actually
I'm
Greg.
navigating.
It's Greg.
Yeah,
Who's doing this?
Greg is doing.
Greg is. So the one that says Weller 45 soldering in the first, that one. Open that up. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
That one,
Now
that one has-
that's a single piece heating element and tip.
correct, integral
Like
tip.
this.
And you can buy on PCH sells that tip with that whole thing. It's on their website. I just bought a couple.
Mhm. Yeah, they have them in 45 and in 50 watt.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So
like
get one of the, I mean, if anybody's really interested, get one of those. They also sell some really neat stuff for chassis makers and so they sell a little
Okay,
block
what were you
called,
showing?
like this.
There you go. Yeah, that's the
there
one.
you go.
This is a 50 watt high performance. This is actually a high temperature, which is basically, I used to use it with a foot pedal. So that way it wasn't sitting there burning the tip up.
Yeah.
And another important thing is to make sure you clean the tip and keep it well tinned, because they will tend to burn. So usually it's just a wet sponge works great.
How long does it take to get up to temperature to use?
This one would get up to temperature in about 3 minutes.
Whoa.
Yeah,
That's because that's the high performance, high temperature.
Okay.
And that's why the foot pedal was so nice, because I could sit there and do what I wanted to do, and the iron was cool and it wasn't burning up. And then when I got everything the way I wanted it, then hit the foot pedal, grab the iron, wait till it gets the temperature, clean it, hit it with a little solder. And sometimes I'll just kind of dip the point in a electronics flux container to help clean it off, and then wipe it off and then tin it.
there are a couple of other things there as well. Okay, there, Radio Shack and a couple of others like Hakko, they sell a tip cleaner, which is a combination of sal ammoniac with some solder in it so that it tins them. They also have those little containers with it looks like the Goldilocks pot scourer inside it. Much better than a wet sponge for cleaning off.
Well, typically when I wanted to really clean mine, I would do it with my stainless steel brush. But having the wet sponge was good for just a quick wipe to get any of the junk that builds up on the tip.
Thing that worries me about the wet sponge is that the thermal shock from the water starts to attack the iron cladding around those tips after a while. Then there's one more trick, if you don't mind, Chris. I have a little a fume trap or a fume fan on my workbench to pull the fumes away from where I'm soldering. Right, it's just a little box with a fan inside it, and if you turn that fan so that it's blowing out and it blows across your soldering iron holder wherever you've got the soldering iron, and it blows the air across the soldering iron while you're not using it, that stops a lot of the crusting that you get on the surface. And basically, because it just cools the surface down just enough that it doesn't do all that encrusting, and then it's very easy. Then it heats up almost immediately as you take it away from that.
If you're going to buy one of those tips, John, while you're at PCH, they sell, as Dennis was referring to, they sell little sal ammoniac blocks for about $7 or $8.
Right.
And it's a really good idea to get. Those are the best tip cleaners if you really get if your tip gets to be in bad shape.
Okay.
And if you're not into the Weller or the Weller type soldering irons, the other one is a Hakko 601, Hakko 601. The nice thing about that is that it has its temperature regulation built into the handle, so you can turn it down right on the handle.
Yep.
And that Hakko FX 601 is a wonderful iron. You can buy them with a 1/4-inch tip or with a 3/8 tip. The smaller, the 1/4-inch tip's probably enough for 1/32 scale cars. And it's an excellent iron.
Incidentally, what I've always preferred was the kind of tip that I could replace the tip on the element, because usually the tip went long before the element was worn out. And typically what happens is after a while, the tips will actually pit and lose the cladding that's on there.
Yep.
And the tip is basically worthless, but you still have a good heating element. So the replacement tips are nice. And if you use the replacement tips, make sure there's a special, it's not like a grease per se, but it's a lubricant that we put on the threads that would pass the heat, but it would make the tip easy to take off of the element. It wouldn't seize.
Yeah.
I was going to ask about that because it looks almost like a light bulb screw.
It is a screw.
At the bottom end of that, you can just screw it straight in like a light bulb. But
Right.
RK's talking about the other ones with the screw on solder tips. You need a little bit of anti-seize in there.
Exactly.
It's like a copper paste that you put in there.
Okay.
Otherwise, well, two things happen. Either they seize up solid, or because there's air in there, they start encrusting on the inside, and eventually they don't even screw on properly.
Well, thank you. Obviously, we're in the right place.
And sorry,
sorry.
back to your jig, John.
Yeah.
Have you cut a bunch of little pins so they fit in all your little holes? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So by the time you put your pins in and put your brass up against them and lock them in with pins and everything, it really shouldn't move that far.
Okay.
A lot of the jigs that are specifically for slot car building have a slot down the center, and then there's a T-bolt that goes into the slot with a little locking nut and some plates. So when I put my main rails on and bars, and I can lock them down from the top as well so they don't flex and move. And I've used bits of masking. It's not, when I started building chassis, I was using 1/4-inch graph paper for bloody a jig. So and there's been more chassis built on a bit of plywood with a bunch of holes drilled in it than you can ever imagine. So you can use bits of masking tape to hold your bits of stuff. And
I think we're up against the age-old problem that it's not the wand, it's the wizard.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's ways around stuff. There's no question about that. And, I tend not to like to tell people that I would, tape a piece of brass down to a soldering iron block because it doesn't sound great, but I've taped a lot of pieces of brass in place before soldering.
So, and that's interesting. What happens to the tape? Does it just like petrify or?
Yeah, but I mean, if you take it off quickly, and then you just clean off the residue with some lighter fluid or something like that, and it'll work fine. And and as a very key thing is we're talking about acid flux. Once you've been soldering for 10 minutes or so with acid flux, you need to get some Ajax cleanser and an old toothbrush and scrub it. Otherwise, the acid flux will just attack your brass or piano wire and just turn it into a hideous rusted mess.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much.
So, Chris, let me ask you. I think it was you. It might have been either you or Dennis. I can't remember. One of you guys said building chassis with popsicle sticks.
You can build them. Yes. I mean, there's actually quite a few. One of the guys who was a member, a guy named Al Penrose, who had a company called BWA. I've known him for when I got a job in a commercial slot car track when I was 13. It wasn't really a job. They made me clean out the washrooms and put chocolate bars on the chocolate bar shelf. But for that, I got free track time and to hang out with the big guys. One of the big guys was Al Penrose. And he's made chassis out of stuff that you couldn't believe. And he's made a lot of them out of popsicle sticks. There's a few examples right now on Slot Forum of popsicle stick chassis.
Now, in all seriousness, though, Chris, I mean, wood bearings are used even in commercial use, are they?
Well, a lot of ocean-going steam, like big ships. I think the Queen Mary used wooden prop shaft bearings for a long time because they would swell with the water and blah 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 blah. Anyway, the main takeaway is that the materials you use in a chassis for most of the racing that most of the guys here do are not as important as building a chassis that's nice and flat and nice and square. And if you build one out of popsicle sticks or styrene or Lex, whatever you want, if it's flat and square, it's going to work well. The difference is when you get into quicker cars with more horsepower or you're racing against a guy with a chassis with some dynamics and torsional flex and all the rest of the stuff designed into it, which is very, very critical and makes a huge difference between a mid-pack chassis and a top-of-the-line chassis. It makes a massive difference. But for 90% of what everybody does here, something that's flat, something that's square is going to work just fine.
Because, well, to your point, Chris, you could even do that with styrene stock as long as it's flat,
sure you can.
Square.
Anything. Just go get some styrene sheets, some styrene tubing, some styrene this, some styrene that. There's a guy on the forums now who has, I don't know how many, he's bought like 10 feet of inch square aluminum channel. And he's cutting it and milling it and gluing a motor on, and the chassis go around just fine. And the neatest thing is to build your own chassis. Like the coolest thing is to start from nothing and then put this thing on the track at the end of the day and see it go around.
Yeah, and especially to put a model car body of some sort on it.
I've had motors behind the rear axle, in front of the rear axle, two motors, upside down, front engine. But like I used to make stuff just to make stuff. A lot of it was hideous, but it went around.
I got to ask you, because I recently was given an Airfix Mini in 130 seconds ago, which is just a gorgeous model, but I'm really tempted to try front drive, but I know how useless it would be. It
can be. They can be. I've seen a few that have worked quite well. All things being equal, if there's a rear drive car and a front wheel drive car, two equal builders, the rear wheel drive car is always going to win. But you can make, we were going to have a proxy for, Tamiya made a 124 scale Mini. And being a Mini, a 124 scale Mini is not that big. Like, it's not much bigger than a 32nd scale car.
Well, to your point, this 132nd scale Mini is about the size, like, it's like a 143rd scale car.
Right, right. So the proxy was going to be, and it sort of got half off the ground. It was going to be 124 scale Tamiya Mini bodies, but it had to be like a Mini. So you had to make a front wheel drive chassis. So if everybody was the same, who cares? It's just the design out of the things. And there are some inherent differences in a front wheel drive car. In a rear wheel drive car, you really don't need front wheels to have any sort of traction whatsoever. They're just there as outriggers. In a front wheel drive car, you need the rear wheels to have as much traction as the front wheels. Because if they don't, when you go around a corner, the back end just slides all over the place. So try it. Like, just do stuff. Like, just, put the motor in sideways, upside down, backwards. Just try stuff. It's more fun to see stuff go around that you've made.
Yeah.
You guys are legit making me want to just pull up Fusion 360, throw down a rectangle, and start adding a motor bracket and pushing brackets and just seeing what happens. But I'm going to be the first to say that the first thing that I want to know right now is, Dennis, did you get that bug? Did you get it?
What bug?
The one that you for about 10 minutes.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I thought he was just syncing sound for post.
No. I'm out in my garage, and believe it or not, we still have mosquitoes that are worrying us out here. Normally, by this time of the year, we don't have any. This is a new breed of mosquito that they call an ankle biter. It's a South American thing that we're getting, and they're like yay big, right? They're these tiny little things, and I have an ultraviolet light going in the garage. And I still see this damn thing buzzing around my face. So that was what it was.
Dang it.
The thing about those damn things, they have the itchiest bites that I have ever had. And I mean, I came from Africa, right? So I know about Anopheles mosquitoes and things that carry malaria and all kinds of other wild and weird diseases. None of them, the bites, none of them itch like this little thing's bites. Man. Horrible.
Well, I hope you get it.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. While you're talking about that, if you want to talk about jigs, I've got something to show you.
Oh,
go for
it. Please.
Hang on. Let me just get back to share screen. There we go. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So this is a jig that's made by a guy in Pennsylvania. And this is, as Chris was talking earlier, that has a channel right down the middle, a T-channel, so that you can put a stud in with it has a nut that runs in the channel, and then you can actually lock things down. This was a 124 scale car that was being built. It has a set of holes down each side that take 1/8 rods, and then I put a piece of tubing over the top of each of those to space them down to 3/32, and then you have axles across with jig wheels to give you the right clearances. So this is how you'd hold it all together, right? There's a couple more, like when I was building the rear end of the car. So I have the rails in place, and you have these little sets of holes, which on this jig are spaced at a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch apart, and you put a 1/16 of an inch.
I see they're kind of staggered there.
Yeah, they're staggered so that you can hold a 1/16 or a 32nd or a couple of other different sizes in there, and that allows you to position everything front and rear. So this is what we were talking about, and it helps a lot. Now those little ceramic screen things that you guys use that you could put pins in, you can do exactly the same thing pretty much. And those have the advantage that you got a lot more holes. So you usually find something, and if you can't find something that fits, you put a 16th pin in it, and then you put a piece of tubing over it, and then a second piece of tubing over the top of that, and you can start making spaces and holding things exactly where you need them.
Right. That's marvelous. Thank you. So it goes right up the center like that.
Yeah,
Some of them have it all the way. Some of them have just a slot at the front and a little slot at the back. It very much depends. There's a guy in Ohio, I think he is. He's called Precision Slot Car, and he makes all kinds of jigs, 1/32nd scale, 1/24th scale, and his are really, really nice, and they work extremely well.
If you're seriously thinking about a jig, John, as Dennis said, it's the one you want is a Precision Slot Car, 1/32nd scale scratch builder, and he makes two versions, one in metric and one in imperial.
And what are they made out of? Like is it
Corian?
Yeah.
Oh, Corian.
Yeah.
So it's
the
a
other thing
countertop.
that's really neat that Dennis had or Dennis was using was Jig Setup Wheels. And Precision Slot Cars make some square jig wheels, and the hole is off center. And the blocks are marked. So depending on which way you turn the block, you can achieve different chassis clearances for different size. So
so in other words, you actually adjust the ride height in that way.
Well, you decide before you start what size tires you're going to use and what clearance you need, and then you work out the size of the jig wheel that you need.
Yeah. Gotcha. So on your chassis, John, so you're going to use, I mean, for your cars, you're probably using 19 millimeter, 20 millimeter wheels and tires.
Right. Yeah. That's right. They're basically scale 15 inches. Yeah.
Right. So what you do is you find these blocks, you put the blocks on an axle and flip them, so they both say, you know, for using 20 millimeter tires, this is going to give you 1.5 or 2 mil clearance. There's all kinds of them. Then what you do, rather than building up your square pieces of tubing to hold your axle, you just slip the piece of the tubing over the axle and make your piano wire rails 90-degree bends at the end like you saw on Dennis's, solder them to the axle tube, and now you're much more precise than using, you know,
pardon me for interrupting, not only more precise, but also you're using less material.
Yes, I would argue the more precise part is the more important.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of
Greg,
you're absolutely in the right spot there. That
here we go. You were right there.
Bottom. Yeah,
you were there.
Bottom a little. Is it Greg?
I stop right there for a sec. Greg, stop right there.
Expand that.
Nope. Number 2004 wire bender. If you guys don't have a good wire bender, this is a very cool little wire bender.
Oh, because you know what? When I do have to bend, I basically it's by eye and by hand.
Well, go up just a bit, Greg.
I think it's showing you the wrong thing. Hold on. Let me try a different share here because it's.
No, you're good. It's the 2004.
We can see the screen.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah, it did a pop-up.
So this one has.
That's the wire bender.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you know, if you want to you put your piece of wire in and that metal thing fits in the hole and spins the wire, bends the wire. But if you got 4 or 5 pieces of wire to bend and you need 90-degree bends, you put your wire in, you put your pins on the bottom of where the 2 holes coming across, put your bender in, and you can bend and check that you got 90 degrees, 45 degrees, whatever. So it's a really handy, cool thing. And it's a way to make a bunch of pieces of wire the same.
Right. So to be nice and consistent in your parts.
And here it is. There you go, right there.
Oh yeah.
So this one has the set of holes on the right hand side are all where you put the pins in to set your rear axle. You can do 3mm axles, 2mm axles, and then there's a bunch of holes in the center where you can adjust your chassis widths, pan widths. On the left-hand side with all the lines is where you would set your wheelbase. So you put your pins in, put your axles in, and then you build everything around your axles and your setup blocks. So you get a really nice square flat chassis. For
Nice.
32nd scale cars, I use this pretty much exclusively. And it's spectacular. The JK or the RGO jigs and stuff that Dennis was showing you are wonderful for 24th scale.
Right.
They're a bit clunky for 32nd scale because
they're difficult to get
most
hold
of
of
the-
because he doesn't always have them in stock.
yeah,
And
and
it
there's
looks
So
like
those are
both
those
metric
the
and
square wheels you were
imperial.
talking about, Chris?
yeah,
Yeah, those are the square
This-
wheels.
yeah. They make a bunch of different kinds.
This is the imperial.
This is the
Imperial.
this, as you can see, is the imperial jig because it's got 1/16, 337, right? And these are the imperial setup wheels. If you get the metric wheels, it'll, instead of saying 720, it'll say 18 mil, 18 and a half, 19 mil and stuff like that. So you get them with a bunch of different diameters by moving the hole up, down, sideways and around.
And generally it's for a 1mm clearance, right?
Yeah.
That's a long way from the Rusket or just the jig.
Yes, which tended to build jigs at 45-degree angles in the first place.
You, unfortunately, depending on how you look after them, they don't always stay looking as clean as that. This is my one.
No, that's yeah. Yours
Wow.
is actually yours
So
is
you
actually pretty.
So it's been branded then.
Oh, well, yeah, it's probably built a couple of hundred chassis, right?
Wow. I didn't know Corian would darken like that.
Well, sometimes I have a mini torch that I use to heat up some really big pieces of brass, and then it discolors it like that. And,
But now it doesn't burn like a piece of wood or anything, does it?
no,
Or-
it doesn't burn, but it does degrade. And so what I often do, this one hasn't had it, but on my 1/24th scale jigs, I'll take this and I'll put it on the belt sander and I'll sand it down and get it flat again. Because believe it or not, even though they're 3/4 of an inch thick, after a while they start to bend. They sag in the middle. Because there's 4 little silicone dots underneath, so that
Oh,
it
yeah.
doesn't move around on my bench. But they sag in the middle because they get pretty warm.
Well, we all sag in the middle, so I can understand.
Well,
But so wow, which is basically what they use for. It's a DuPont product for countertops, right?
mm-hmm.
Amazing.
But the precision stock car ones are the best. They're good thick pieces. They're beautifully done. The accessories that you get, the axles and the pins are all stainless steel, so that helps a lot. It's well worth the money if you're going to be building any large number of chassis.
Well, what I showed were the number 2 and number 3 sidewinders that I've ever built. So now, yeah, it is a bit like it's a bit addictive. It's really kind of neat.
Yeah, addiction's one word for it, I guess. Obsession would be another.
Compulsion. There's another word.
Yeah, compulsion.
But I can see where you start talking about dynamics the way you and Chris talk about when you're really, for example, if you were doing a 1/32nd scale Group C car versus like a 1955 Porsche, where you'd want to get that kind of performance, and you can really design I imagine some really neat aspects of the chassis to get it to hustle.
Yeah, not even that though. I mean, if you're putting a chassis under a like a 904 Porsche, right? And you're going, it's tiny, and you want some performance. You've got to start getting some reasonable dynamics in it. I built a couple like that for Tony Palmer at one stage. That go really well. I managed to squeeze an angle winder under a 904 at one stage, but
With what kind of motor, Dennis? Like an S-can or?
yeah, with an S-can. But the inlines actually work better. Let me see if I can find the photos. Customer cars. Here we go.
Wow. Because those cars were like what? Like originally, what, two liters? I can't remember how big the engine.
Yeah,
was.
they were 2 liter.
Yeah.
So they were the whole car is just under 2 inches wide. I mean, they're not particularly big at all. Let's see, which one is this? No, it's not the right one.
Yeah, 2 inches.
Yeah. So it's all what you need to, it all depends on the track you're running on, the motor you're using, the grip in the tires, et cetera, but every car works better if there are some parameters to the longitudinal flex in the car and the torsional flex in the car. Your car being quite stiff will go around just fine. But a chassis that flexes torsionally it's much smoother, it transitions much better. It'll load the tires much better in a corner. So it's a real fine art of deciding how much flex and where the flex is, and then weighting the car accordingly. So there's a lot of science and a lot of skill in building a high performance chassis.
That's the kind of stuff that I remember when I was reading about thingies. I think Jack, Jaak, on Slot Forum was just instrumental in my understanding of thingies and the beauty in his chassis and his bodies and everything. And I remember seeing some just mind-blowing chassis engineering, and he wasn't going for outright speed. He was just going for just beauty in the chassis, beauty in the body, beauty in the driving of the car. I wish we could get him on here. I mean, damn.
There's plenty of guys around who Jack wishes he could build chassis like.
There you go.
How diplomatic can he be at times? Man, oh man.
I need to read more Chris Walker posts.
Well, again, I it's the great thing about doing it in brass too is that, if you do take a little bit of time and a little bit of brass, I mean, I just went with my hands, but my goodness, what a difference! It really, you really feel like a sense of accomplishment, and then to have it actually move.
Right.
Yep.
There you go.
So you were talking who was it? John who was talking about minis.
Yeah.
All right. Can I share again?
Absolutely.
Let's see. Try this. Can you see that?
Yeah. Now it's not front motored though, is it?
No. This wasn't front mounted. This was a mini. This is a Scalex mini that a friend of mine in Colorado sent me and said, "See what you can do." And so what I did was, I'm going to move this thing out the way.
Sorry, Dennis, if I may interrupt. Where did you get the wheels?
He sent me them. I think they came from Ranch Design. They're 1/43 scale wheels.
Okay.
So this is the chassis.
My goodness, look at
this
that.
This is the chassis that went underneath it, right? But the cool part about this is that I use, because of the small wheels, I used all the powertrain out of a Polycar Formula One. I used the double gears and the lay shaft, but I couldn't use the motor part because the wheels are too small. I would not have been able to, the bottom of the motor would have been underneath. So I had to make a complete brass rear end to carry the gears so that I could get the ground clearance and still get all the pieces. But actually it worked pretty well.
So I'm sorry, if you could go back to that you actually fabricated that whole rear end?
I fabricated the whole rear end, yeah.
Okay, so hold on. So you've sawed. Oh, I see.
I made two side plates, that had all the holes drilled in them. I actually soldered them together and drilled straight through them, and then separated them. And then I made a brass plate that went up against the motor, and then I started soldering the whole thing together with a brass plate underneath. So it was all soldered together, and then I started building it into the chassis.
Wow. And then you've got the outrigger pans held together by, it looks like a cross.
Okay, and then the outrigger pans, there's a hole just behind the motor, just underneath the pinion, goes right through, and then there's a piece of wire that goes all the way through that joins the two pans at the back, and then they're individually held at the front by this loop bend that's soldered onto the pan and then soldered just underneath the front axle, so that those pans actually can move around a little.
Yeah, the wire that goes under the pinion is not held to the center of the chassis.
Not at all, no.
Right.
No, it just limits the movement of the back of the pan.
Right.
Right.
Ah,
then-
okay. So in looking at this, I should not have soldered my piano wire to the chassis. I should have used like a tube or something instead.
That would have been a nice idea. Put the wire through the tube, and then it allows the back of the pan to move a little
To
bit. Yeah.
move. Right. Okay.
So
And
these,
now, in this case, of course, the body was mounted onto these side pans through these two holes that are here.
Right.
There was
And to your point, that's the intention of what I was attempting to do. Sorry to interrupt.
Go for it. That's okay.
So
Not wrong way.
oh, I see. And then it suspends the body. Okay, gotcha.
So then the body's mounted through those two countersunk holes. There was a piece of foam rubber with a bit of brass glued to it that had a nut in it that was glued on the inside of the body, and then the screws go through there. Then it has this single wire rail all the way up to the front that carried this piece of brass here that has the serial number on it that carries the guide and the front axle. So there's a bit of twist in it that is the flex is provided in those two piano wire rails. Don't think I've got any. This is another one. Nothing else.
yeah. So if you look at that picture, John, where the L shape comes down the pan behind the motor bracket,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's only soldered on the two legs on each pan. So it sort of rattles around in the middle.
It rattles around in a hole that's drilled through this. Yeah, I've got a lot of them that do that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the wire going through the hole, the top of the hole acts as an upstop for the pan.
That's right.
The wire
And the
going
rails act as a
through
downstop.
acts as a downstop for the pan. And then the front end setup that Dennis showed, it was soldered to the front of the chassis and back it wasn't soldered along there so the front end flexes a bit.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
this
that
piece
so
of
there's only
wire
one-
that has all these bends in it is only soldered onto the chassis for about 1/4 of an inch right up front.
Yeah.
And then it's loose along here, and then it's soldered onto the pan around this area.
Oh, so those three pieces of wire aren't soldered together then?
No, well, not that piece that's on the pan.
Yeah.
That piece is loose. It's soldered onto the pan, and then it's soldered onto the other wire right up at the front.
Gotcha. Wow. So that gives your body float then.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And the other thing on John, the next step for you is you see how Dennis has made piano wire L shapes to hold the front axle.
Right.
So rather than stacking up a bunch of pieces of square,
Yeah.
you can use these L shapes and then just solder an axle tube right to those.
Gotcha.
And now if you're using the blocks, you can calculate, okay, I'm going to use an 18 mil front tire. I want 2 mils of clearance. Put that on the block, solder your tube, and it's going to be perfect every time. And if anyone's looking for little mini wheels, Colin Spark, who runs a shop in England called RS Slot Racing,
Mm-hmm.
he makes 10-inch scale aluminum set screw wheels for minis, and they're just gorgeous little things. So.
Yep.
Awesome.
Um,
No, that's fantastic. Wow. Okay, so I know what the next step is then.
Yeah. And then if you really want to
Can I
go,
ask-
then you go and you do this, right?
Oh,
Sorry,
This was-
before we move on from the other chassis, can I ask
Ah.
how much vertical movement there is with the pans?
Oh, very, very little, about probably a
Mil-
quarter of a
millimeter?
millimeter to that's about it, 25,000.
Right.
Yeah, maybe
Okay.
maybe half a millimeter.
but I was going to say,
Wow.
Dennis,
Right.
you don't really need that much, right?
No, you just want the movement. You don't want it.
Yeah.
You don't want it floating around all over. You just want it loose,
Yeah.
just so that it isolates things, decouples things. That's the word I was looking for.
Okay, so
Right.
getting to
Is
that
it-
point, if I got a brass tube that fit the piano wire I was using, is that enough movement or too much?
If
Or
it fits, it's not enough. So if you've got a piece of brass tubing that's like 16th inside diameter, then you put a piece of wire through it that's 0.055, and then you've got 7 thousandths of movement. That's probably about enough. Or a piece of 0.47 inside there, and then you've got 15 thousandths of movement.
okay,
Is
but
it-
it shouldn't rattle like a spray can. It should be.
No, it's just
Right.
it's just move.
Movement is that, I mean, you read a lot on the forums about guys leaving the body screws loose so the body can move up and down 3 or 4 inches, which is like it's all you're trying to do is isolate vibrations.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
a thou is as good as a mile. There's
Gotcha.
also a pretty good set of engineering principles which would tell you that if you've got a body that weighs 20 grams and you screw it onto your chassis and you leave a 1/4 inch of movement on the body, it goes around. If it goes around a corner, that body can move up and outwards from the chassis 1/4 of an inch. It gains momentum in that movement. And then when it hits the stops, you've got a lot of momentum with a 20-gram body now trying to pull the chassis off the track.
Yeah, it almost acts, I imagine, like a lever.
Right. So if you reduce the motion or reduce the length of travel enough that you're isolating vibrations from the chassis, you can also restrict the amount of momentum that the body builds up on a huge amount of travel and get a better handling car. So I always tell, like, loose is loose. If it's not binding, if it's moving, if it's reducing vibrations and isolating vibrations, a thou is as good as a mile. A thou is actually better than a mile, but
I'm going to say that is the most valuable piece of information I have learned to date. Because just
I
like
agree with that. Yeah.
so many people, like half the guys in my analog club, be setting up their loose bodies like, chink, 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 chink,
Yeah.
chink. Like, I'm like, really? That helps?
With what tires are you running? You running rubber tire? Or?
I mean, pretty much per Chris's definition, they're all hard tires.
Oh, okay.
They're all going to be NSRs and slotteds and stuff like that.
I found on
run
slotted cars, I used to back off the body screws like a whole turn. I used to back off the pod screws a turn. I found as soon as I went down to half a turn, the cars got better. And on the pod screws, if I'm just down at a 1/4 of a turn, so basically the pod just slides around, the car works even better.
The thing that really sticks in my brain right now for some reason is I remember Maurizio Ferrari came to one of the meets at Alan's place, and I was there, and I'm like talking to him about setup and stuff, and he specifically recommended the large head brass tuner screws, right, to reduce the lateral motion and limit it to only vertical motion. And that kind of goes in the face of what you guys are saying, right? Because you're just talking about letting it just decoupling. I think that is the operative word here. You're just
Yes.
decoupling the body and chassis from the pod and whatnot to reduce vibrations and stuff like that. But he was straight up talking about making it so that it only moves vertically and not horizontally.
And again, it depends on the track and depends on the car and depends on the driver. But
I mean, slotted cars on a rubbered in wood track, you know, I don't remember that much more about it than that. But
under those circumstances, you're looking at minimal movement anyway, because you have so much grip.
Yeah, that's the next stage on that, Greg, is using silicone or urethane washers between the chassis bits and the body posts.
Yeah, like last time.
Right
Yeah, we
now,
talked about that last time around.
Yeah, now you can limit the motion more, but cushion with the silicone washers.
Yeah.
But I mean, just think about it. Having a ton of motion creates a ton of momentum. And at some point in time, that momentum stops when the screws come up enough so that the body hits the stops. And that energy's got to go somewhere. And that energy is just trying to pull your car off the track.
Well, unlike air, momentum, it is to scale, right?
Well,
I'm straight. Yep, momentum is to scale.
Momentum is to scale.
Gotcha.
Because mass is to scale, right?
Like you've heard me say previously that I usually just run tight screws for the most part. But that's because every time I try to run loose, it was too loose. I always thought that more loose was better loose. And so since I wasn't getting what I thought I expected from loose, I would go tight. But what I really want is barely loose, not loosey loose.
Yeah, again, a thou is as good as a mile. A thou is actually a thou is better than a mile.
Yeah.
All you're trying to do is decouple or isolate the vibrations in the chassis from going up the body posts. And the body, in some cases, just acts like a resonance chamber and magnifies the vibrations and noise. So as long as you just eliminate that, there is zero handling gains. Actually, there's negative handling gains to have excessive motion in the body.
Here's maybe a dumb question. Is there a difference between using square and round tubing to hold axles?
There is. Square tubing actually provides less friction than round tubing because the axle's only touching the tubing on 4 spots.
So oh my gosh, so I'm an idiot savant. I did something right.
Well, not only that, it also provides this little area for excess lubricant, so that it's not giving you any kind of viscous drag, which it would in a round tube.
Yeah. And lastly, when you do your L-shape uprights, piano wire uprights to hold them, it's nicer to have a bit of a flat surface to solder on as opposed to a round surface.
Bigger joint area.
Well, chalk one up for the idiot. Man, geez, feeling good after that.
Don't square tubes. I mean, I would imagine that the difference is pretty small, but
it's very
more material, right?
Yes, everything counts in small amounts.
But yeah, you make a great point about soldering the L bend, if you will, of the piano wire, because that's my next step, and it should work better for a square tube than a round tube.
Yeah, it's easier.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a little stronger.
Mind you, I've done tons of chassis with square tubing, and what drives me nuts sometimes with my sort of bizarre eye for things is sometimes I won't get the square tubing perfectly, so the 2 sides of the square tubing are perfectly, I might not get the square tubing so the top and bottom are perfectly flat aligned with the flat surface. It can be, and it'll drive me insane. So with round tubing, with a round tubing, I never ever have to worry about it.
Oh my goodness, I listen to him and I think to myself, how he's never been in my garage while I'm building. How does he know all this stuff that I say to myself while I'm busy with this? Yeah.
That's awesome. So yeah, so I guess the round is more forgiving to the eye.
Well, I like the square tubing for a bunch of reasons, and I like the round tubing for a bunch of different reasons. And as Greg pointed out, a lot of things in slot racing make microscopic differences. If you took a car right now and took a round tube out and put a square tube in, and I told you there was less friction, are you going to cut any time off your lap time? Probably not. The theory cannot be disproven. It is true. But the differences in real world application. I mean, I see guys bring cars into our shop and they go, I changed this. And I go, well, that's great. But your rear axle's so bound up, it doesn't matter what car's not going to go no matter what you're going to do. So, everything's got to be perfect. But it certainly, in some instances, makes it easier to solder sometimes.
But to your point, it's like real one-to-one racing. There are cumulative effects. It's not necessarily one particular thing. It's
none of these. None of the things we're talking about is. I mean, every pro chassis builder could get rid of their round tubing and put square tubing in, and not a bloody difference. Like it's not.
Gotcha.
It's a series of 100 things.
Right. Awesome.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording. No, I'm just kidding. No, we got 10 minutes left. 15 minutes left. We got plenty of time for more awesome chassis soldering tips and tricks.
Chassis soldering tips.
Oh, I was gonna show something else. Hang on a moment.
Yeah.
When we were talking about, we weren't actually, but if we're talking about bending wire.
We are now.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
There are, again, Chris was talking about the wire bender, but on a little place called Micromark, can you see this? There are these.
Yeah.
I have those. So can you use them?
The top end one, the like the center jaw one.
Yeah.
One of the most useful tools I've ever bought in terms of being able to bend wire accurately and with minimal distortion of the wire anywhere else except in the bend, right? Because very often if you hold a piece of wire in a pair of pliers and you bend the other leg, right? That leg doesn't necessarily stay straight. It gets some sort of curve on it because of you trying to bend it. If you put it into those pliers and you press it, it's bending both sides of the wire. So you get a very, very nice straight joint with just the bend in the middle, right?
Right. Now, Dennis, I've used those or these tools for brass. I hesitated to use it for piano wire.
I have bent with those the double jawed ones. I bend wire up to 0.078, 2 millimeter wire. It takes one hell of a squeeze, but it does it. Yeah. It'll bend 16th of an inch, 0.062 wire all day. I bend this stuff all day with those.
Wow. Well, I gotta give that a try.
Yeah.
Leo.
Can I ask, what is the difference between piano wire and brass rod?
Oh,
massive. Well, piano wire is steel for a starter, right? Oh. So it's a heck of a lot stronger, a heck of a lot stiffer.
Right. Okay, I understand now. Thank you. I kind of assumed it was all brass.
The biggest thing, Leo, the advantage of piano wire or music wire is that it has memory.
Oh,
so as it flexes, which is what you want a chassis to do, and it does it in different ways, but you learn how to engineer a chassis to flex, music wire will come back.
Yeah.
Brass has a tendency to bend or flex and stay flexed.
Right, right.
It looks gorgeous. You know, in the mid 60s, it was all brass. And then guys figured out that you could put a piece of piano wire in the brass tubing, you could load it up. And other than a lot of the retro cars and stuff, if you want to make, Greg was talking about jack chassis, the brass still looks gorgeous. I mean, it looks beautiful, right?
Mhm.
It's compared to piano wire, it's a crummy material to make slot car chassis out of because it doesn't flex.
when
And
it
it's
does,
weak.
it stays
It's just
flexed.
not as strong.
I use a combination a lot.
Yeah.
I'll use the basic brass. Let me stop this share and I'll pick up another share quickly. I'll be back in a minute. Here.
Well, while you're finding, I just want to thank you guys for all the help because I really want to get back into the shop and try something with, you know, first of all, with those benders, Dennis, I want to try some piano wire, but also just to, you know, get a little bit more movement to the outrigger pans.
Mm-hmm. Okay, can you see this chassis?
Yeah.
All right, so this is a Formula One chassis for a retro car like that, right? A retro Formula One car. And it has a piece of 062 wire that's bent around the back, and I bent that in a little K&S wire bender to get that nice big radius. And that runs all the way forward to the front, and it's soldered onto the bracket, and it's soldered to the nose piece up the front. And then just to the outboard of that 062 steel rail are two 062. They're not brass, they're low fuming bronze. It's you buy it in the welding store, right? And it's basically brazing rod. And it's a little stronger than regular brass. If you try to bend it, it tends to crack or break. So it's a little stiffer, but I use that, and I use two pieces of that on either side. The whole deal is all soldered together at the back. The bracket, the steel rail, and the two bronze rails are soldered together at the back, and they're soldered together at the front. And then depending on the track, the driver, the motor, whatever the conditions, I may solder those two bronze rails together to each other all the way down, front to rear on both sides. That creates a little stiffer car, which I do for more experienced drivers. This chassis is for a newbie, and I want to give it a little more grip, so I've left them unsoldered. So you do that. Now, Chris is also talking about square versus round tubing. I use square tubing at the back here, so that I get a good joint against the bracket and against the rails. And here it's straighting if you don't get it put in straight, because you want it flat up against the brass, the flat brass of the bracket. And this just braces the rear end a little. So there's an example of using both. Yeah. And what happens here is, the reason for it is the steel gives you the strength and the initial flex, but sometimes the steel flexes too quickly, or it will return to its standard, to its rest position too quickly, and it makes a car kind of snappy coming out of a turn. Or so in order to slow down that reaction is why I put the brass in, and it makes for a more predictable frame.
Can I ask about the front axle? And it looks like it's bound with something there.
Yes. What I do is I have two pieces of bent 062 wire, and because this is a round surface to round surface, right, the fillet of solder is not very much. So I use some 32 gauge picture hanging wire, and I strap it like that, and then I flood the wire with flux, and then I heat the whole joint up so that you get the solder is pulled into the wire all the way around the joint.
Wow.
You don't need to do that, John.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say,
No, I mean, this is a Formula One, so it has exposed wheels. It's running a 50,000 RPM motor against 8 other madmen or 7 other madmen on a track, right, on a big commercial track. So these joints are important. So that's why I do that.
This is the inside world, is it?
Stay there for a sentence. Stay there for a sec, Dennis. The other thing that you might want to consider, John, is it's a very good idea to step the guide holder at the tongue.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, when you have your hole cut into the brass piece under that, you're forcing the car to have a little higher ride height because you got to clear all the guide and the braid and everything underneath it. So by stepping this, you lower the front of the car, 06, whatever he's got under there a little bit. So it just makes you can run the front of the chassis a little bit lower.
Okay, no, that's a great, yeah, see, that's something I should really do for sure. Yeah, because I always thought it had to be integral.
No, not at all.
No. And actually, if I can make a plug here, Dennis makes some absolutely wonderful little tubes, little inserts that come in various IDs for the guides. So and this is a steel guide tongue on this.
This particular one is a steel one with a 3/16 hole in it.
That's
for the commercial brackets. Commercial guides, I mean.
You can make that out of brass, John, just a piece of brass strip for what you're doing.
Okay, thank you.
And if you really want to get sexy, get a couple of Dennis's little tubes, measure your guide flags, measure the post diameter, and then Dennis will sell you some.
See if I can find a picture of that somewhere. It'll take too long.
Come on, man, hurry up.
All right, hold on. You can.
Oh, I saw. This is like slot car eye candy over here.
I don't know what you're looking at right now because I'm looking for photographs.
We're still looking at your retro F1 car.
Okay.
Yeah.
We see your photos. We see your photos.google.com webpage right now.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I hope you have your homework ready to show next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, scorched fingers and all.
Where are my guide tubes? Guide tubes. Here we go. All right, so now I'm going to stop sharing that and share this.
Oh.
Okay, so I make the wrong way. I make them in a couple of different ways. So that's how they fit, right? They fit into those 3/16 ones. So you could use a piece of brass, drill a 3/16 hole in the end of it, and then you pop in and solder in one of these, right? They're 3/16 diameter. They have a little 1/4-inch shoulder on them. And then the big deal is that the inside is sized to whatever you want them. I can either make them flat, so you put them into the hole from underneath, or I make them with this little shoulder on them, so you put them into the hole from above. And then the inside diameter is either 1/8 of an inch for like TSRF guides or old vintage guides, or I can do a 3.55 diameter, which is like NSR and some of the slotted stuff, or I can do a 3.7 millimeter diameter, which is for the scale auto, or I have another one which I will actually remount, slightly taper for the slotted wood guides.
Yeah, because I use primarily the TSRF guides, which are like copies of I don't know what, but they're I guess they're the one.
So you would use a 1/8 hole. Yeah.
Right.
And the nice part about it is, first of all, they're tall, and they're a very nice fit around the shaft of the guide. So
it also looks like you'll always get a perfect 90-degree or perpendicular to your tongue.
Correct. If you're careful as you solder them in. Then that's exactly what you get. Yeah.
And if I were you, John, I would get the ones on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
Because they mount from the top. The other ones mount from the bottom. So when you step your guide plate for the chassis you're doing, the flange on the one on the left gets rid of a lot of that step because it's below your guide tongue now. So the one on the right will let you solder it in for the top. You don't lose anything. And the best thing about these is it eliminates slop in the guide, which is that's a
And
subject.
they're quite long, so you can cut them down to size. If they don't fit under the body or something like that, you just cut them down. There's plenty of meat there, plenty of material.
Well, it looks like I've got something to add to somebody's shopping list.
There you go.
And as we know, it is always important to eliminate slop and to make sure that there's a snug fit on the shaft.
Correct.
That's
So we're going to end our recording at this point.
That's
and we
a
will
massive,
continue
that's a
chatting.
massive subject.
Probably just as well you ended it there.
But so I have not yet hit stop, so watch your mouth, people. I haven't hit the stop button yet. Careful.
Thanks, guys.
All
Thanks,
right.
guys.
Bye-bye.